Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics, and you're watching my weekly show, Histrionics, where every week we come together to talk about women's issues, both in the political arena and also in society from a centrist point of view. If you like these episodes, don't forget to check out others in the series, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening over on Apple or Spotify, please head over and leave me a review. The audio side to this is still new, and I would really appreciate it. It does a huge help in us getting the word out on those platforms. Without further ado, let's jump into this week's episode. I'm so excited to talk about this. I feel like this is something that has fascinated me and gotten my attention for some time, but I don't really know that we've talked about it on the show, at least not explicitly. And it is this whole narrative that we often see parroted in the red pill communities, basically telling men that women hit the wall pretty much at 25 to 30 years old. They're washed up. Their opportunities on the sexual marketplace, those dry up. The fact that they have like a name for it is just so cringe and weird. But yeah, women super washed up, no romantic options past 30, used, ran through, whereas men, according to them, age like a fine wine and only continue to have more and more options as they age, particularly into their 30s and 40s, where as they continue to gain more money, as they continue to climb in their careers, the women in their 20s are going to increasingly want them, and they will have so many 20-year-old models banging down their door in the next couple of decades, it won't even be funny. And while that's happening, all of the women, all of their peers that rejected them in their 20s that were of their own same age, those women are going to dry up alone. They're going to have cats, and they're going to be sitting there watching these men online run through models and live their like best Leonardo DiCaprio life, and then they'll feel bad. And obviously, this narrative has encountered significant pushback, but these men, it's like you're talking to somebody in a cult, okay? I grew up around religion. I've known a lot of people in cults. I know what it feels like to meet and encounter and have a discussion with somebody in a cult. These men are in a cult. You can't tell them nothing. It's like a programming takes over when you try to introduce any kind of logic or actual data or statistics or just even anecdotal evidence that their whole line of thinking is completely cracked. You see this programming just drop, and they like immediately regurgitate whatever they've been taught to say, okay? So in this case, when you hear people push back on them, the programming is that, no, we care about women. We like women. We're just trying to make sure that they're being told the truth because society is lying to them. And because of that, they are going to miss their opportunity to have kids because they can't have kids for as long as they think they can. And thank God, these red pill incel men who have had probably zero actual interactions, much less relationships with real women, and who also, by my count, have zero medical degrees amongst them, across the entire grouping of them. They truly believe that they understand a woman's anatomy better than women do. And they truly seem to think that women are being told all of these like rampant lies by society and other feminists that have convinced them that they don't need to be concerned about their age, that they can have kids whenever they want to, that men will want them at any point throughout their lives. And the red pill men are just coming to rescue them and tell them the harsh truth in order to try to save them. And again, this is just laughable. As a woman who has lived in society for 36 years of my life, the idea that lots of women are just running around and have no idea that they can't have kids past a certain age, that they are not at all concerned about getting married or finding somebody in their youth, or that they are being told by society that their value as a woman is somehow untethered from their appearance and it doesn't matter that they age. I can't think of a more delusional, like the fact that you think this is just indicative of the fact that you know zero women and that you aren't even in like the same algorithms as women, because women are told ad nauseum long before the red pill incels like got together online. Women have been told throughout history that their value is in getting married and in having kids, that they're a failure if they don't do that. If they don't somehow manage to find somebody to do that with before 30, that they are probably either a lesbian or a feminist hating man and that they're not going to have any prospects. Like, these are the things that have kept women up for nights throughout my entire lifetime. It is so wild to me that this that this is what they think the narrative, the overarching messages out there are. No woman is unaware that they have a finite time in which to have children, okay? Especially the women who really want to have kids. And by the way, the red pill has not even bothered to actually do the very basic amount of research into reproduction and realize that yes, women do have a finite time in which to have kids, but it's not by age 25 or 30. Women can definitely have kids throughout their 30s. Many of them can have kids into their 40s. And now, as science and technology have continued to advance, many women can have kids into their 40s and 50s, right? Via surrogates, via freezing their eggs, via IVF. The window is actually increasing, not decreasing. So if you're so concerned with making sure women know what their options are, at least do a modicum of research into it so you know what you're talking about and don't look like a jackass. But the reality is these men have no intention of trying to help women. They hate women. What they want to do is fearmonger women and scare them into taking whatever scraps they can get, whatever dusty man they can find in their 20s, and locking him down and reproducing with him because they themselves want access to women who will not give them the time of day. Okay, that's the agenda. And what's so interesting to me, and I say this on a broad number of issues, is that when you try to talk to people, I work in public policy for the most part, when I am trying to talk to an audience about a piece of public policy that I like or that I don't like, and I'm trying to convince them that they should support it or not support it based on a set of talking points or arguments, the number one thing I have to do before I attempt to message to them and get them on my side is to actually know them. Because if I don't actually know them, I'm going to sound like an alien trying to come in and address their concerns. I'm probably going to have a lot of straw man beliefs about what they think and what they believe. I'm probably going to try to use lingo that I think is going to resonate with them, but actually makes me sound like an absolute loser. I'm probably going to make arguments that are completely out here when the ones that I need to convince them would be grounded down here. You cannot convince people to your way of thinking without knowing them. This is How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie 101, okay? And those guys really, every single one of them, ought to maybe pick up a book and put down the YouTube podcast grifters for just a day, okay? But they don't. And because of that, the way that they're messaging, the way that this whole narrative that they're pushing is actually landing on women is completely lost to them. And it goes right over their heads that the messages they're pushing actually have the opposite effect of what they are hoping they will have. Because in their minds, they're thinking women are going to hear these messages and they're going to think, oh my gosh, I better hurry up in my 20s and find a man who will want me. I better be open to any kinds of man that I meet, because if I don't, then I might end up one of those people into their 30s who hasn't married yet, and then I'm going to have even fewer options, and this is scary, and so I better just hurry up and take what I can get and have a kid and settle down and not, play my odds, not play the field, not even try to experiment or see who I can meet and see what the best kind of partner is I can find. That's what they think women are going to take away from this. But in reality, when you tell women that men only see them and value them for their youth, for their beauty and their fertility, and that basically past their 20s, they no longer have those things and therefore no longer have intrinsic value to men, what you're saying to a woman is that they ought to avoid men like the plague, because aging is an inevitability. Every single person is going to get older. You realize that, right? I have to ask with these types. And so women also recognize that because aging is an inevitability, their looks are also inevitably going to fade. And so of the things that you were telling them men prioritize, they recognize that, yeah, I might not actually lose those things in my 20s like these jokers are arguing, but I will lose them over time into my 40s and 50s and 60s. I will age. My looks by society standards will begin to decrease. I will not be able to continue to have kids. And so if you're telling me that those are the only things men value, what you're telling me is if I settle down with a man in my 20s, that as I age, he's going to look down on me. He's not going to actually value me for who I am. He's probably going to try to cheat on me with younger people. Therefore, I'm going to maybe just avoid this whole scenario in general. Nobody wants to marry somebody who is not going to value them for who they are as a person, who is not going to value them at all stages throughout their life, somebody who is going to basically see them as used goods once they sacrifice their bodies and reproduce for them. Like, honestly, I cannot think of a better argument for women just staying single than that. And so when they push these narratives, what they're actually doing is limiting their pool of options, which I'm sure was already very limited, or they wouldn't have fallen into these spaces to begin with. But they're further limiting it, because what you're doing is talking women out of interacting with men at all. They literally argue against themselves all the time, and they are too foolish to even know it. Now, I want to be clear that when I talk about these narratives, when I talk about the men that are saying these things, I in no way think this is all men, okay? If it were even close to like a majority of men, I think I'd lose my mind. I have a lot of media literacy. I am very, very well aware of how these kinds of online groups get together and interact, and they have more time than most people because most people are out living their lives and having a normal one. They aren't. And so they have a lot of time to push these messages and push them. And it creates this like echo chamber online where it feels like a lot of people think this way. In reality, I want to say this loud and clear, and I'll say it over and over because I get falsely accused of this all the time in my comments and from other different platforms online. I like men. I think a lot of men are great. I have very positive relationships with a vast number of men in my family, with several amazing guys I have been best friends with for literally decades, and now with my husband, and also with men in his family. Like, I like men, and I'm so glad that most of them are wise enough to not fall into this. But that being said, I am very concerned with what does seem to be a growing number of these kinds of disaffected men online. And I'm afraid for them, not only because I think it has really devastating implications for these mentalities to continue to seep into the right and push women away from them. That's going to have really disastrous effects on our political system if it's allowed to continue. But I'm also worried for them as individuals, because as a true feminist, I do believe in the equality of men and women. And I care about both men and women being able to lead happy, successful, individualistic lives. And this kind of thinking is toxic. And so when these men are being told, don't worry, it's okay that you're not having success with women right now in your late teens and in your 20s. They're just a bunch of hoes. They're sleeping with all these chads. They only want you for your money. So just wait till you're a little bit older. And then the new crop of 20-year-olds are going to be chasing you, and you're going to be aging great. And these women are going to be aging poorly. And then you can just go date much younger, and you're going to have a much more successful time. And that, I think, is a very seductive kind of message for these types that are falling into this, okay? It's a victim-based mentality that comes accompanied with this like revenge porn idea of how their lives are going to get better down here if they just wait it out. But there's so many problems with this narrative, I truly didn't know where to begin. So I'm just going to take it from the top, I guess. Number one, the idea that women actually have fewer options as they move into their 30s or 40s is just simply not true. It's not true statistically. It's not true anecdotally. And when I say it's not true, what I mean is not that there's a smaller pool of people to pick from. There is, because people are starting to get married throughout their 20s and 30s. And so you have fewer people your age around you who are single. What I mean is it's not true that women in their 30s have fewer options than men in their 30s. Because as a whole, the vast majority of men are not thinking this way, okay? The vast majority of people in general identify with and connect with and want to be with people who are relatively the same age as them, which is about a 1 to 3 year difference. On top of that, women in their 30s are also capable of dating older men than them if they want. And additionally, the thing that always gets left out of this is that a lot of women in their 30s get hit on by younger men all the time. And I don't just mean hit on, I mean younger men pursuing relationships with them. Secondarily, there's a lot of logic missing in these communities in general, but this is one instance of it. When you are saying to a man that he's not having success with women in his 20s, but he probably will when he's in his 30s and 40s with women who are also in their 20s, that makes no sense, okay? Women in their 20s are attracted to the same things no matter like which crop of women in their 20s we're talking about. There is a select number of women in their 20s who will be open to dating older men, and they will be open to dating them for a small number of reasons. One of which is that they want more access to wealth, or they want more access to fame, or there is an exceptionally attractive guy who happens to be older but is more attractive than his peers in their 20s. And so they will go for those guys. But those guys that have those three things, they were also having success with women when they were in their own 20s, okay? They're what we call outliers. And they're going to continue to have success with women because they have highly desirable traits by a number of people. But that is nowhere near the picture that the red pill is painting for these young guys. I want you to hear it from their own mouths. So let's first and foremost let the men speak, because so often people are like, you didn't let them actually say it for themselves. I would love for you to hear it for yourselves.
The wall is basically the part where I would say roughly around a age when a woman reaches age 30 and her looks.
28 is about the start of it.
Yeah. It's about the start of it. But I think 30 is a typical benchmark, and that's when her looks start to go downhill. Her ability to attract men or the same standard of men that she did when she was in her prime, which is usually sort of late teens to mid 20s, starts to shrink. And at that point, her dating pool obviously starts to shrink as well. And really the goal for a lot of women is to bag the guy that she wants when she's in her prime. So I would say that at the age of 28, you're pretty much at the upper limit towards the end of your best period to be able to get the guy that you want.
This is just honestly so funny to me because, and I've seen this trend going around TikTok, I could do it too, where women are posting pictures of themselves in their 20s versus in their 30s, and they are arguably much hotter in their 30s. And that's because we have more access to more like, not surgical, but like plastic surgery light procedures like filler or Botox. You can afford better skin treatments as you age. You can get laser facials. Like the glow up is real. And for me included, I look back at pictures of me in my 20s and I definitely think I look better now. And secondarily, on top of that is the fact that men are really bad at gauging a woman's age, like really, really bad. Even to this day, a lot of my trolls will try to like attack me. They're like, well, you're just like 18 years old. So what do you know? I'm 36 years old. I'm 36 years old. Okay. The vast majority of men could not tell the difference in me being a 36-year-old woman next to a 28-year-old woman. It's not like your looks do like this as soon as you turn 30. I think maybe they used to more. You look back at pictures of people from sitcoms and like even the 90s and people who were like in their 40s or 50s, they looked pretty old. That's no longer the case. Nowadays, our 50-year-olds look like Jennifer Aniston. It's insane. Furthermore, even if none of that were true, even if they were absolutely right that women, once they get into their 30s, like it goes like this and they're not attractive anymore, why would you want to be with a man who thinks that way? Why would you want to be with a man who speaks about women like this guy?
All right, so right now we are talking about the wall and the age that most women hit the wall. Now, for me personally, I choose not to date women over 30 years old. For me, that is the wall for most women. Most women actually begin to actually lose their looks in their mid-20s. Some as young as 25, depending on how well or how piss poorly they've taken care of themselves, their diet, how much they drink, how often they smoke. Okay, all these factors are going to come into play. So some women will actually hit the wall before 30. Okay, but for most women on average who take decent care of themselves, they will generally hit the wall around 30 years old. Now, this does not mean that she cannot continue to still look good after the age of 30. I mean, a lot of women, if they take care of themselves and they don't smoke, they don't drink, they go to the gym, they eat fairly healthy, they can extend their physical attractiveness beyond the age of 30. Okay, but generally, even that girl is no longer in her prime. Okay, a woman's prime really is her late teens and early 20s. Okay, that is a woman's prime, generally from the age of 18 to 23. That is typically a woman's prime for me. And after the age of 23, once she starts to hit about 24, 25, that's when she starts to lose the fullness in her face. Just the fullness in her cheekbones and just all the features that make her face look youthful. Okay, the older she gets, the more sunken in her face will be. Okay, it's just, natural as humans as we get older. Okay, you can't hang on to your youth forever. So for most women, on average, they hit the wall by the time they hit 30. Does this mean that she can't continue to still look good beyond 30? No, of course not. Like I said, if she takes care of herself and whatnot, she can extend her sexual market value beyond the age of 30. But, okay, big caveat, but she is not nearly, okay, she does not nearly have as much SMV value, sexual market value, as she did 10 years earlier when she was in her early 20s. Okay, that's just a fact. And for women who are over 30 who are just like lying to themselves, you know, I mean, you see tons of women out there, sadly, just lying to themselves that they are just as attractive as the 18-year-olds coming into adulthood. It's just not true. I mean, any guy from age 15 to age 65, 75 would rather take an 18-year-old woman over a 30-year-old woman, okay? Any guy in his right mind would choose the younger, more fertile women. That is why us as men are attracted to younger women, is because they are more fertile at that age, and they give us the highest possibility of producing healthy offspring without any defects or retardation or any health effects. Because the older a woman gets and she tries to reproduce, she tries to have kids, the more chances there are for her to have complications with that child. Okay, that's just, you know, that's just nature at work. So for women, they hit the wall at 30, and I always advise women that are in my own family, women that I'm close to, women that I've dated previously, that are still in their 20s, that are attractive, and that still have high SMV value, high sexual marketplace value. I always constantly encourage these girls to cash in their chips. Okay, I tell them, hey, find the highest value male you can and just settle down with him before you hit 30. Because if you wait until after the age of 30, the less likely you are to be able to lock down a guy like that. Okay, and do not kid yourself, ladies. It just really, really saddens me when I see these women walking around out there that are in their late 30s, 40s, even some in their 50s, who are deluding themselves into believing that they can seriously compete with these 18-year-olds. You cannot, okay? You just can't. And if you ever go to these venues, especially in Los Angeles, and you see these 30, 40, and 50-year-old women still out there at the clubs and still going out there to, you know, bar hopping and out at the venues, these younger women are laughing at you. Okay, they're laughing, they're talking shit behind your back, they're telling their girlfriends like, oh my God, what are my aunties doing here? Or, oh, what are our grandmothers doing here? What are those grandmothers doing in our club? They're saying those things. And you know what? When you were their age, you were saying those things too.
You guys, I have to pause him here. I'm literally taking notes of all the dumb things he said. I have to respond to, and I don't want to lose track. So first and foremost, does anybody else notice how begrudgingly he says he's into girls who are 18 to 23? Like, he so badly wants to go down even beneath that. It's so obvious. And he's like a reminder, like, oh yeah, I have to say 18 because that's legal. Men who think like this are creeps and oftentimes wannabe pedophiles, okay? Every single woman who has a fully formed brain is aware of this and grossed out by it. You know why? Because every woman remembers being a girl who's 18 to 23 years old. And we remember how naive and how vulnerable we were. We had not had that much life experience yet. Our brains were not fully formed, okay? Especially like the region that evaluates risk and reward, not fully formed until you're age 25. The judgment is not very good. And that's why these dusty old creeps want them. They want women who are easy to manipulate. They very much want to be around women that make them feel good, make them feel, you know, like big guy up here. And that's something I think all men want, okay? They really need to feel respected and adored. But as you age, if you're not an impressive man, then your ability to get that from women your own age decreases significantly, because as their brains become fully formed, as they become more worldly, they're able to spot you for the loser that you are. And so you have to keep returning to this like very young crop of very recently children in order to have a woman that sees you in the way you want to be perceived. And not having a fully formed brain is very convenient for the types of men who very much want to be able to control women as well. I think there are, of course, always outliers. Like for me in my 30s, there are some men in their 40s and I guess maybe in their 50s that I would find attractive. There's some men in their 20s that I might find attractive. But would I want to actually be with them? No, because their life experience is going to be very different from mine. Their circles are going to be very different from mine. Their thinking patterns are going to be very different from mine. Like, I can't fathom at my age being sexually attracted to a man in their 20s because I remember being in my 20s and I see them as the children or very recently children that they still are. So the men that are permanently attracted, as he says he is, to people who are 18 to 23, that's not because it's an outlier you happen to connect with this person. It's because your mentality is stuck in the place of a 20-year-old. That's the only reason you can still be attracted and have anything in common with them. Another point I have to make is that these guys are obsessed with fertility in the creepiest of ways possible. The way he said fertile. Ugh. The fact that I even have to regurgitate this, it just gives me goosebumps. It's so gross and seedy. And again, it's biologically and scientifically wrong. Yes, as you age, the risk in your pregnancies increases, but that's also true for men. There is a whole body of science discussing how as men age, their sperm can start to create problems. I cannot believe I'm having to talk about this. It's indecent, but they brought it up first. And it's facts, okay? So yes, men can continue to have kids throughout their lives. It doesn't mean that those pregnancies are not riskier thanks to their age. The reason these kinds of men are so hostile to women as they age, to women who are their peers, is because those women don't want them. They didn't want them when they were in their 20s, and they don't want them now. And that's where this bitterness comes from that you can see that is just seeping out of him, right? They don't want him because they have flagged him for the loser that he is, and his only hope is to keep returning to an age pool that will eventually recognize the exact same things about him. When he says that younger women are laughing at older women in the bars, I don't remember that. And I spent a lot of my 20s in the bars. I was in Nashville. I had a great time hopping all over Broadway. I was the queen of the bar scene. I don't remember seeing older women at the bars. That wasn't even a thing. Or if we did, they were there with their husbands and they were lovely and nice. Who I do remember laughing at significantly were the creepy old men that constantly came to the bars and would try to hit on us, okay? And honestly, in our 20s, most of us were pretty broke, so we would definitely talk to them for a minute to get a free drink, and then it was Operation Get Out of There. We were constantly making fun of them and laughing at them, especially the ones that you saw all the time, right? Because Nashville has a lot of tourists, so you always have the kind of older tourists doing this, but there was also a big group of men who had either had failed marriages or had never managed to marry that were still out of the bars every single Saturday, Sunday, well into their 40s and 50s. And we thought they were absolute jokes and losers. None of us would have ever given them a second thought. It's the older men in the bars that the women are laughing at.
The red pill guys have this kind of revenge fantasy where it's oh, you won't date me now in your 20s, but in your 30s, just you wait. And it's okay, women in their 30s are doing fine. Women are much less likely, statistically, to be single in their 30s versus their 20s. And the average age of marriage in terms of median is 29 for women. Yeah. It's about 29. It depends on UK, Australia, Canada, okay, US, but around 29, which means that half of women, median, so half of women are getting married at an age older than 29.
At the end of the day, most people, as I've said at the beginning of this episode, and I will continue to say, most people marry people about their own age. The average age for getting married for both men and women has continued to creep up and up. It's around very late 20s at this point. And women in their 30s are not as a whole having a harder time finding a man to marry than they did in their 20s. You guys, we live in the age of information. If the red pill men can use their little fingers to find these creepy communities, I don't know why they also can't use their fingers to do basic research and pull up data. This is not hard stuff to find. This isn't super into the weeds. You're not even really having to get into the actual studies to obtain these basic facts. But I think the reason that they don't is because these narratives are soothing to them. They like being cocooned in them. It makes them feel good. They enjoy their delulu-ness, okay? I want to play you a little bit more of this YouTube video and the way this man thinks to let you see inside their minds.
As a man, your sexual market value really doesn't peak until you hit the age of 35. Okay, so for men, you're not going to hit the wall at 30, okay? You're not going to hit the wall for a while. And for men, I don't even believe there is a wall. From what I've witnessed out there, and a lot of the badass dudes I've seen out there, it's still crushing it in their 60s and 70s. These guys have no wall, okay? There's just no wall for these guys. These guys are easily still dating women in their 20s, like it's nothing.
Aside from celebrities and very wealthy or very attractive men, I see absolutely no evidence of this, okay? This is delusional. And why I think it's especially delusional is that the same men that are like buying into these fantasies of I'm going to get to be my 30s and 40s and then I'm going to have like my pick of the baddies and they're going to be into me. They're the same men that are obsessed with women using them for money, which again, I will continue to repeat, means that they do not have any money to speak of because no man who actually has money is all that worried about being used for it. But at the end of the day, you're still not going to have your pick of the baddies in their 20s if you're not wealthy or famous or super attractive. And again, if you were, then you wouldn't be having this hard of a time with women in your 20s, okay? These things just don't like magically change. And so what's crazy to me is that these types will continue to show you the outliers and be like, this could be you. And there's no connecting the dots of like, I don't have much in common with that guy. It's probably not going to be me. And even if I were able to obtain these kinds of women, they would be the kinds of women who want men with money. And I don't have that.
Where are the girls that are not gonna be with a man just for his money?
Guys like this are the exact reason why I laugh when guys call girls delusional. Chris, let's get a little reality check over here, okay? You're from Los Angeles. You're looking for a Kendall Jenner, natural beauty type girl, skinny, size 0 to 4, low maintenance, doesn't care about money. I'm gonna be real with you, okay? Since it seems like only girls are delusional in this world. Girls like that are getting flown out by rappers and athletes. They're getting the VIP experience at the Delilah by a founder of a tech company, my guy. Oh, where are the girls with no makeup on and just, who I can chill with sweats on? Every girl can wear sweats on with no makeup. That is not what you're looking for, okay? Wake up. Do you know how much it takes to get your nails done as a woman? $150 to $200, sometimes even more. Some girls get lash extensions, lot get filler. Who's paying for that? You want girls who have that look, but you don't want to pay for it? And for those who think I'm tripping, go on this man's Instagram's following. Nothing in life is free. You get what you pay for. Keep that in mind.
When these kinds of red pill grifters point out celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio that are continuing to date really young women, many of them models, they are trying to market you a belief system, but it is false because if you are not a celebrity or very, very successful, those women are not going to be interested in you. The only reason they are able to obtain younger women is because they are getting used. They are getting played. They are in transactional relationships, and they are as aware of that as anybody else. And deep down, when you're inside a transactional relationship, you know that you are a loser. You know it. It doesn't feel good to be used, whether it be for your looks or for money. Now, there are enough people who are desperate to obtain one of those two things and are willing to put themselves in those situations. But that means that you are a failure of a person. These men are not respected. They are not loved. And they know it. They've accepted it. They look at men like Leonardo DiCaprio, who looks like a clown out here trying to hang out with very young girls, and they see him with disdain. And the people that are around these types do too. Their families, their colleagues, their communities. These are not men that are seen as like pillars of success or of high character or as men that you should emulate. No, they're seen as failures because quality women don't opt into these relationships either. It's pretty easy to be a sex worker if you want to, and sex work can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So yes, these kinds of men will always find some women who are okay with those kinds of transactional relationships, but they are essentially entering into a legally available option of prostitution. And I'm going to call it for what it is.
I wasn't sure if I should make this video because I do not want the elites of the world to come for me, but have you ever wondered how these girls end up on places like Epstein Island or just being human trafficked in general? Or on the flip side of it, have you ever seen those Instagram models who are wearing brand new Hermes bags like once a month and consistently in Dubai? Well, I am an Instagram model and I just got added to the group chat. And I'm personally going to expose it because I have always wanted to work in human trafficking. I'm actually job hunting right now so that I can work along those fields. And I kind of just feel called to do this because if I can save just like one girl out there, that's all that matters to me. So of course, I'm going to show you guys proof. I'm going to block out the names of these families and the elites and the actors and all these people because I'm not trying to die from this. I just want to bring awareness and what it can look like. So basically, they just send out different castings. This one is from one of the largest and richest families of a certain country. Obviously, I'm going to block it out so you don't know who that is. Top 3 richest families in the world. Payment is $500 to $1,500 per day. Flights are accommodated, villas, expensive gifts, jewelry, shopping, cash in hand. Like, come on. Here's another one. It's $5,000 per week. The catch is that they put you in a hotel, it looks like, in Dubai. You have everything paid for. You have crazy pay, and you do photo shoots and fashion magazines, right? They're going to try and sell you all of these things. And the catch is you shall attend dinners from time to time with the most influential people in Dubai. Here's another one to go be with the prince of a certain country. Blocked everything out because I'm not trying to get killed. The only reason I am making this video is because I genuinely want to bring awareness to human trafficking. And if I can save one girl who is naive enough to go on one of these trips, then I'd be happy. Ladies, please be careful.
Most women do not want to be sex workers, and that's why both people in these kinds of relationships are looked down on. The women in these situations, I think, get a little bit more of a break reputation-wise by society because, again, they are seen as very young and easy to manipulate. But they're not seen as women who have high character or who are particularly wise. This tweet I saw says, I can't tell you how many men I know who are in their late 20s, early 30s, who make good money, 100,000 pounds plus, and want to get married, however, can't for the life of them find a suitable partner. And somebody quote tweeted it and said, men, women are gold-digging evil whores. Also men, we have money, but they don't want us. Wah! And that is the reality. I've said over and over, I do not know the kinds of women that the red pill thinks exist where they're just like, must have 100,000 plus, that's all I care about. No, I know more women who are dating men who make about what they make or sometimes even less, sometimes even helping the men with their bills than I know women in the aforementioned like made up category. And that's because most women recognize that having money is not enough to make you a suitable partner. Men in the red pill think this way because those are the things that they would value if they were a woman because they want to be kept. They want so badly to be passenger princesses, and so they assume that all other women want that too. But most women are not down for a transactional relationship. Most women will gladly leave you if you make a lot of money, but do not love them and treat them well. Because they are women of quality, they want to be with men of quality. Another tweet says, I know men hate hearing this, but males who chase women significantly younger than themselves are mostly seen as failures and creeps by women of all ages, including women in their 20s. Again, I was these women. I remember them. I know them, okay? We at best entertained them to get what we needed out of them, mostly laughed at them, mostly thought they were huge embarrassments, and we feared ending up like them or remotely in their circles. If and when I had a friend in my 20s who did date an older man, it was like very openly discussed that she was just doing it for a short time period in order to get trips or get flown out. And again, behind the scenes, those girls would continue to mock these men relentlessly. Another tweet I want to read says, it's a brutal reality check when you see posts about 40-year-old men dating 20-year-old women somehow being a desirable outcome. And then you see this couple in real life and you notice how the elephant in the room can't be ignored. You see the shame in his eyes, you witness the subtle looks of disapproval, disappointment, and the hinting glance of disgust from everyone in the room. It remains unspoken, but everybody intuitively understands the covert failure of character that the 40-year-old man displays so brazenly and with a geriatric recklessness. Either he is led entirely by lust and a lack of phallic intellect, or he has not accumulated the life experience or mental scar tissue to match with someone in his appropriate age range. It is pathological and he is untrustworthy. We know what we see. In no uncertain terms, we have witnessed a creep. She goes on to say, perhaps even worse are the ramifications this has on other facets of his life. Men of respect and integrity will naturally distrust this lustful creep. They'll avoid business with him and ensure he is not heavily involved with any serious endeavor. There is no way to explain what he has done to his friends or his family. They look down upon him. They know he is consumed by lust, and they know he does not possess any true mental fortitude in any way that matters. Perhaps he gets the girl, but he loses his self-respect. The men that do this are often very, very immature. They are usually severely emotionally or mentally stunted. They frequently have no ability to actually pair bond, which I think is so funny because the red pill talks about pair bonding all the time, saying women can't pair bond if they slept around, when really it's the men who get screwed over once or twice and can never love again and become complete shells of people. They do not have the qualities that the vast majority of people recognize make a good partner or a good father. And the reason they're able to keep dating these young women is, again, because these young women are using them. They have absolutely no intention of actually settling down with them or making them their partner or the father of their children in the majority of circumstances. This is a quote tweet to the tweet I read just a second ago that said it's a brutal reality check. And they said, this is 100% correct, and anyone pretending otherwise is coping. 20 years is simply too great of an age gap, and it says a lot about the kind of people in those relationships. The woman could just be a gold digger, but she could also be young and impressionable and not know any better. But 98% of the time, the man is, at absolute best, guided by lust, and at worst, is developmentally stunted. Men would do well to ignore red pill charlatans who tell them that they're better off by waiting until their middle age to try and find a young woman. Why would you want that? Why would she want you? Red pill master types are mental, emotional 20-year-olds who never grew up. And this is something that I think men need to pay attention to. This is so obviously true. Men who cannot control their lust have always been seen as losers, not just by women, but by other men too, because it shows you have no real masculinity. You have no self-control. You are driven like an animal by your primal instincts. You haven't evolved very much. If the men who are falling prey to these kinds of conversations online had the money or fame or insane looks that they actually need to attract women with a 20-year age gap, then they wouldn't need this narrative to cope to begin with. As this account by Holly on Twitter says, dating in your 30s and 40s, you meet a ton of men who want kids, who can't wait to be a father, who have been dreaming about this their entire lives, but have zero savings for it, have in no way prepared for it, but expect you to pay for half of it. It's actually way easier to meet single men who want to get married and have kids after 35. They're legion, trust me. The problem is a lot of them don't have the means to be fathers and have delusions about family life that they assume the right woman will resolve for them. And this is more likely to be your fate, okay? If you are a young teen or in your 20s as a man and you're listening to this and thinking that you're going to look like Leonardo DiCaprio, no. What you're probably going to look like is the picture she just described, because you're not taking the steps necessary that you need to in order to get your life together, in order to actually attract a partner, and in order to be able to provide a full family life and actually have kids. Side note, I have to play you this very, very funny TikTok because I want you all to understand how women actually see men who try to do this.
I don't want to cheat on her at all. I love her. I love her more than I wish I loved her. But I wouldn't mind having a young chick to impress, like a 25-year-old chick that you could be like, take a look at my tour bus. She's like, whoa! As opposed to my wife going, $125,000.
Yeah.
A waste of money.
Well, this might settle your mind somewhat. I can tell you for a fact that a 25-year-old woman will not be impressed with you.
You don't think?
No.
These men are delusional. They're so delusional. They will even get into a marriage, have a great wife. They're probably very lucky to have her, and they'll still think, oh, I bet I could impress that young 25-year-old girl. She'd think I was awesome. No, she probably won't. She's going to think you're a creep. And again, if you really want women to be impressed by you, then do something impressive. Be impressive, okay? Do something to make your wife think you're impressive. The fact that you have to go find people with unfully formed brains to impress them speaks volumes. It just speaks volumes. I don't even know how that makes you feel good about yourself if you're impressing somebody that much younger. This is like me going and stunting on a 12-year-old. What? No, but seriously, I really need you to know. Women admire men, society admires men, other men admire men who treat women well, who are able to have long-standing marriages with people around their same age, who have produced families and raised kids well, who are contributors to their community. That's what's impressive. These kinds of clowns impress literally no one but their own ego.
4 tequila shots. 4 tequila shots. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is that your boyfriend Ryan? He's not your boyfriend. That's what I thought. Why don't we take these shots and we go back to my house? Dude, you're like 50. We can all play like Twister. Or maybe Monopoly. Dude. Yeah, let's go. Dude, I'm so amped for tonight. Like, I have been waiting for this moment all week.
The older I get, the more I realize why older men date women that are significantly younger than them, and only because the women their age would never, ever even glance at them twice. Because now there are men my age that try to approach me and I have to actively withhold the urge to spit on them, but younger me would have just died over them, and it was for stupid reasons like, oh my god, he's so cool and mature, he has his own apartment, he should, he's 30. I just thought that was such a sign of maturity and being like a real grown-up, but those men were creme de la piss, okay, like cream of the turds. Just very unimpressive, but I thought that them having like, you know, good jobs was a sign of them being real adults, and they were just little immature baby boys. But yeah, those men are almost always losers. Still think it's gross, but now I see the logic.
I am giving it to you straight. You can ignore me at your own peril, but I want to say this is a cope, okay? This mentality that you can just wait until you're in your 30s or 40s and then you're going to get your revenge on all the hot women that didn't want you is a cope. And it's a mentality that pushes these men to focus on like a future, delusional, optimistic fairy tale versus their immediate present and taking actual concrete steps they could take right now to better their lives. Cartoons Hate Her on Twitter, which is a great follow if you don't follow her. She said, I think the Leonardo DiCaprio style discourse, the idea that young men are being told to wait until they're 40 to find a 20-year-old girlfriend, is actually about young, lonely men whose present state is so unpleasant that they'd rather focus on their future selves. And that really is what it is. These are men who are not getting picked in their 20s, and they could do things. They could actually take some steps to increase the likelihood that they would get picked. But instead of doing that, they're just all projection into the future. I think I actually read this tweet on a former episode, but I came across it again. And I want to clarify, I don't agree with everything that the person in this tweet is saying. But what I do think is fascinating about it is that they are giving a pretty raw picture into the psyche of the men that fall into these kinds of communities. This is an account called Homath, which I think tells you a lot. And they are in a comment thread responding to the controversy that broke out like a month or two ago where all of these red pill men were dunking on Pamela Anderson for having the audacity to age and saying that she wasn't as hot as she once was and like trying to demean her, even though she's still exceptionally hot. But this account responded and said that what they're talking about is an underlying structure for what men are doing in these interactions. The men express disdain for older women because they're bitter that no one picked them when they were 26. They're lashing out. The main point of my account, the main message that I'm sending, is that if you structure society in a way that causes a large enough portion of men to become bitter and resentful towards society for not giving them what they were promised, if they did what they were told, they will stop acting in a socially beneficial manner. Which, like, major side note here, don't you think it's really interesting that when we talk about female loneliness or the inability for females to find good partners, even when they take all the steps that society tells them they need to take, we have like disdain for them and mocking of them, like, oh, you're going to be a bitter old cat lady, even from our politicians. But yet we don't have to like warn anybody about them becoming violent or taking it out on society. And I just think that's a very interesting distinction between the genders. Anyways, back to this tweet. He says, when I was younger, I got laid a lot. Sure, Jan. But when I started real relationships, I got such shallow, stupid excuses. Basically, quote, I want to have sex with more people was the usual one. I am completely unconvinced any single woman has ever said that to a man. He goes on to say he has 2 personal shortcomings, but he thinks they're not that big of a deal. Other than that, he's not perfect, but he's not too bad either. He goes on to say, I tried numerous times to keep someone from 23 to 33, and then I noticed that the now older women were more and more ready to settle, and I didn't want to because where were you when I was ready? How dare you not want me when I wanted you? This bitterness is causing a lot of social degradation, and it does no good to tell men, F off, shut up, and start liking how we treated you, even though it was an awful experience and you were treated like you didn't matter. Only we matter. Now go to work and pay for what's left of me. Ooh, that mentality is pretty bleak. You are not entitled to people wanting you. You're also not entitled to people being interested or available at the same time that you happen to be interested in them. And the fact that somebody might be interested in you at a later date than when you were initially interested probably has a lot more to do about timing and maybe indications that you've grown, although given this whole tweet, I doubt that. But the fact that you're pissed off about it and that you have a vendetta against them, and now your mentality is, I have to go to work and pay for what's left of you, towards another human being. Like, I'm sorry, it's a good thing that people are avoiding you. Women are seeing through you. They're recognizing that you don't actually like and respect other women. It doesn't sound like you like and respect your other self or humanity in general. These are not normal ways to process rejection. Lastly, he says, you have to understand that keeping a certain percentage of people in stable marriages from the early 20s onward is really the only way any civilization has ever created new generations of people and kept them productive. By changing the way everything works, you've given a lot of people extended emotional difficulty that they're going to express in one way or another. Mocking old ladies that used to be hot is one of those ways. They're basically saying, haha, now you have nothing, because it makes them feel better about all the times that they had nothing. Is it bad behavior? Sure. Are you going to make them stop by lecturing them? Certainly not. The social changes of the last few decades broke people apart and isolated them and redistributed how much connection and attention people get. You're hearing mostly the men who are the biggest losers in that equation when you hear the bitterness, and that's a bad sign because those are men who are going to be acting more and more selfishly after being treated like they were worthless for decades. You don't want a large class of bitter, selfish men who take delight in women's misfortune, but here we are. To which I would say that to say that societies have only worked under this structure for so many years and therefore that's the only way they can work is bogus. They were structured that way in order to give men who probably should have had their lineages die off a better chance. You forced women into relationships and into procreating with men who were absolute dirt, who treated them terribly, who had no right to a partner or to have kids, and probably society would be better off if they were admitted from the gene pool. Like, these are the kinds of men that basically benefited from those structures. It's not that society cannot continue to grow and be beneficial and have long-lasting, stable marriages without that infrastructure. But what does have to happen is that those men have to get it together. They are being forced to actually compete in a real marketplace right now, and they are finding that because they have not worked on themselves or brought anything to the table, they are losing in the competition. And instead of having some self-awareness and recognizing that they need to go pull themselves up by their bootstraps and actually bring something to the table that would benefit another person, and to maybe take the spotlight off themselves if they want to build a life with somebody else, instead they're bitter and they're threatening and they're mean and they're dehumanizing. Because again, these are not people that should be procreating or in partnership. They're not good people. But that's why the red pill and the manosphere is attracting a lot of these kinds of men, because for decades, they didn't have to work on themselves. They didn't have to compete. They could basically rely on a system that left women destitute and ostracized if they didn't agree to marry one of them. And at the end of the day, it is a much more seductive message to tell people you're a victim. It's not your fault. It's this whole other camp of people that's ruining your life. That's a lot easier message than saying you might be a problem. You might need to improve. You might need to work on yourselves. And I feel like it's the exact opposite of what I hear from women right now. Women are online talking about, I'm doing all these things to try to be a better partner. I am learning new skills. I'm involving myself in my community. I'm going to therapy. Like they're getting their degrees. They're working hard. And they're being told, oh, men don't care about any of that. They just want you for your fertility and you're useless. Women seem to have the exact opposite way of approaching the current problems when it comes to dating and relationships that we're facing. And instead of blaming whole groups of people, they're genuinely trying to work on themselves and improve. And yet they're still being devalued for the very real attributes that they are increasingly bringing to the table. It's madness. Somebody responded to that tweet and said, you perfectly expressed my feelings of bitterness that I felt when I was in my early 20s. Something about not being taken seriously as a prospect while women go around effing filled me with anger that eventually ended up harming me. And I've heard this from a lot of men who have fortunately pulled themselves out of the red pill narrative, but they'll say, I was bitter, I was angry, these messages were intoxicating, and thank God I got out because they were going to keep me trapped, but this is where I was coming from. And what we need to be saying to men instead is you're not owed attraction. You're not owed women. If you are in your 20s and you're getting overlooked, then let's have some hard conversations and figure out some approaches and skill sets you might need to develop. But they aren't saying that, right? They're saying just bide your time and one day you'll get to come in and be promiscuous and run through a bunch of women in their 20s, which, by the way, is a false narrative. This idea that women are just being super promiscuous in their 20s and screwing around and don't care about marriage and don't care about kids. You were in your mom's basement. You are not in the real world. That's not what's really happening on the ground. Most women in their 20s are already prioritizing these things. They're looking for them, they're dating, they're trying to find them. And the problem is that the men are not meeting them there, okay? Both in terms of having their act together as far as careers and education and earning capacity, and also their healing journey and being in a good mental state to be a supportive partner and be a good future parent. They aren't finding a ton of men to pick from in their 20s. And even when they find somebody that might be suitable enough, more often than not, they're getting drug along in never-ending, long-term relationships, hoping for a ring. That's what most women in their 20s are doing right now. This tweet says, for every woman I've met who's delaying getting married, I've met 10 women being strung along by deadbeat boyfriends who like having a living girlfriend but refuse to pop the question. Like, hard same, okay? I saw this happening in my 20s. I had men try to do it to me. I always had a golden rule. I wouldn't date somebody for any more than 2 years without a ring, and I stood by it, and thank God. So I look back at every single one of those men, I'm like, oh, thank God they didn't propose. Thank God, because, like, I would have had a terrible marriage. But, like, women feel that pressure, okay? They are willing to settle for less than they should because of that pressure. And most of the time when they aren't getting married in their 20s, it's because their boyfriends aren't proposing. And a lot of them will just keep kicking it, hoping that he eventually does, because the idea of going back into like the wide open dating pool is terrifying for women because it's awful and violent and scary. This account is from Alexander. He's an actual evolutionary psychologist. You should follow him if you truly care about data. But he says there is this perception that the median woman is run through by bad boys up until age 20. But the most common relationship pattern is serial monogamy and looks something like this. Ages 18 to 21, dating someone for 1 to 4 years. Ages 21 to 24, dating someone else for 1 to 4 years. Ages 24 to 28, dating someone else for 1 to 4 years. There will be a lot of individual variation here. A lot of men and women will have gaps in between where they have no sexual partners at all for 1 to 2 years. A sizable minority of people will have a hookup or two, but not very many. A lot of people will date for shorter or longer periods of time. The chart below shows the annual distribution of sexual partners for men and women. In this same data set, about 90% of sexual partners were in a committed relationship. The 20s of the median women looks less like a cock carousel. Oh my God, I can't believe I just had to say that. And more like a relay race. Long stretches with one partner before a breakup and finding a new one. The same is true for men as well. All of these tall, dark, and handsome chads are doing this too, by the way. Handsome and tall men are more likely to be in a committed relationship. A lot of hookups and promiscuity is occurring at the mid-levels. The truly ugly may be excluded entirely, but the truly handsome are not much more likely to be pursuing promiscuous sexual strategies. Bad boys are behaving a little differently from the caricature too. We tend to imagine someone having sex with a new woman from Tinder or the club every night. But these are also the men who form long-term relationships that just don't last. All of those baby mamas were products of failed long-term relationships, very few from hookups. You can imagine all the men getting divorced in their late 20s, too. These are men much more likely to be high in antisocial traits like the dark triad. So are all of the men who have been cheated on and in relationships that way. Yep, the bad boys get cheated on even more than the nice guy. People who cheat, who have criminal records or antisocial dark traits, are more likely to select people like themselves as prospective long-term partners. And so their relationships are more likely to end badly. So by age 30 or 35, you have a mix of women who are single, most of whom haven't been especially promiscuous, but who have simply had all of their time tied up in a handful of relationships. Attractive but promiscuous women aren't getting rejected either. Half of men don't even ask about body count. Men who have been promiscuous themselves care even less. Incidentally, male virgins care the most. What prevents women from being picked at age 30 to 35? Probably not much beyond 1, being unattractive. Remember, half of the male and female population is overweight, and at age 35, your dating pool is substantially smaller. All of the good relationship havers don't stay single that long. And 2, their own selectivity. They aren't that attracted to the men around them. Half of single women at this age are single by choice versus only 10 to 20% of single men being single by choice. These narratives fall apart with even just like the slightest of probing. And even when they do exist, there are so many reasons for why they are not good long-term solutions. First and foremost being that the women who tend to opt into these kinds of transactional, promiscuous, like lust-based relationships, they usually have some issues. And I don't say that to be demeaning. Women who have daddy issues, like it is the dad, it is the man that caused them, okay? It's his like fault. But these are not very healed or well-evolved women. They're struggling. That's the kind of person you're going to attract in these dynamics that the red pill is promising men.
Healthy, emotionally stable 22-year-old is not usually physically attracted to a 45-year-old or even a 40-year-old. A 22-year-old tends to see a 35-year-old as an old man, yeah? But when she starts to blur the line with older men and sexuality, it suggests that there is some childhood trauma potentially regarding her father. Because the reality is, if you had a stable father figure in your home, you wouldn't be able to sexualize a man that looks around the same age as your father.
Secondarily, if the woman does not have issues, then she probably is just playing you. She's going to use you for the advantages that you can give her, but you yourself will eventually get ran through. And that looks so bleak on a man. And as an example of that, I'd like to point you towards Scott Disick. Yes, Scott Disick, formerly of Kardashian fame, now pretty much an absolute nobody. But he was partnered with Kourtney Kardashian for, I think, close to a decade. They had a number of kids together. She would never marry him, though. And the reason she wouldn't marry him is because he was a playboy that kept cheating on her with younger model-type women. He just could not seem to turn down the trappings of fame and money. And so this kept happening, and eventually she left him. She then got married well into her 40s as a single mom. She married a very prominent musician, so he's wealthy and successful, and they still had another baby. Scott, meanwhile, is washed up and alone and desperately trying to get invited to the family's birthday parties because he has no family, because he ruined his family chasing younger women.
It's so hard for me to feel bad for Scott after seeing that clip with Kendall, because he literally made his bed. It's like he still wants access to the life and the lifestyle after putting Kourtney through some of the worst years of her life. That's not how it works. And I don't like Kendall, but at least she stood up for her sister and was like, listen, I'm going to have a birthday dinner and my sister's going to be there. And my sister doesn't want you to be there. So 1 + 1 = 2. This is the same Scott that paraded and cheated on Kourtney for almost the entire time that they were together. And they had some great moments, but that's in the past. To put all that extra guilt onto Kris Jenner and the family for not inviting you to different, it's not, sir, no. You still have access to your kids. You're still a part of those events with those kids because you are their father. But to say you want to go to Aspen with the family, no. And then people want to still bring up Tristan. The only reason why Tristan is still around and is still being welcomed is because Khloe's kind of forcing her family to be okay with it. When are y'all going to understand that the person in the family has the power dynamic? If Kourtney really wanted Scott around, he would be around, but she's not comfortable. So guess what? They got to choose a side. If Khloe woke up and said, I don't want y'all having Tristan around, I don't want him there, then that's what would be happening. It's not because Tristan is any better. That's because that's what Khloe wants. So for him to sit here and with these fake boo-boo tears, it's like, no, you want something. You want it basically how it is back in the day. And you want it when it was too late because you didn't appreciate it while you had it. You didn't impregnate this girl about 3-4 times, had all these kids. And now that she's moved on with Travis and living a secluded, different life than you're not invited to, you want to pull the what we're family card. I'm sorry, y'all, we're family. She has no loyalty and no ties to you. Yes, she must have said that she was going to treat you like a son, but I do think that that's exactly what she's doing, trying to treat you as a son as best as possible. You were family. I don't even think they were married. I don't know. You were family through common law, and there's only so far she can go with you. That's like saying that you disrespected her daughter. I don't know. I just don't feel sorry for Scott. I think it's time for him to move on. I think he's made his bed, and he was running around here with all these young women, all these young girls, and they ran through him and went on and lived their life. And now he's sad that he can't get what he once had back. And you're never going to get it back. And it's too late. And oftentimes men want what they can't have, when it's too late. I don't feel sorry for him at all.
The women who want you for your fame and money will only want you for as long as the same and money lasts. And oftentimes, that's not all that long. And while Scott may still be able to obtain younger women, I think what he's finding is what many of these men have found, which is that it's an empty, hollow, sad lifestyle to only be with people who want you for your fame and your money. And what I think is very sad and also, a bit karmatic, if you will, in this situation is that as women age, we see statistically, I covered this in an older episode of Histrionics, that women are actually okay being single. They're much more okay being alone than men. They're much less likely to remarry if they do lose a spouse to divorce or to death. And they really aren't all that worried about aging alone. And that's because most of them have really strong communities outside of romantic relationships. They're going to be just fine. Men, on the other hand, are desperate to be married, especially as they age, because they need somebody to take care of them, and they become increasingly isolated as time goes by. But what's happening currently amongst, I would say, like middle-aged to slightly older women, it's a very valid conversation. I've heard this both from women I know in my real life, from women in my father's church who are in this age range, and also on TikTok, discussing the fact that they don't want to be anybody's hospice wife, okay? Like, they are picking up on this, they are clued into it, and they are recognizing that the men their age, or even the older men who are trying to, like, they're in their, like, 80s trying to date a 60-year-old woman, these women are like, no, I'm good, sir. I don't want to marry you and take care of you through your old age. No thanks. Because that is something that people want to do for you when you have had a long, successful life together, when they actually care about you as a person, when you have been with them through multiple phases of life, when you have earned that value. Trying to find a woman to be by your bedside and take care of you as you age is not going to be all that easy for you.
Get ready with me for church and let's talk about hospice wives. So I am 45, I'm single, I have been divorced for 3 years now, intend to stay that way, as Randy Travis would say, forever and ever, amen. I did date somewhere in my second year post-divorce and figured out that this was not going to be the move for me. But there have been, and again, this is not everyone, but there have been a plethora of men in the age range of 45 to 60-ish who have approached me and asked me out. And my response is always the same. I don't date. And by the way, if you do makeup, don't come for me, okay? We do what we do, okay? And I have gotten a lot of, like, pushback on the I don't date. And the main comments are things like, you're going to die alone. Well, duh. Everybody dies alone. Even if you're in a room full of people, you're the only one dying. Everybody dies alone. You're going to be alone the rest of your life. That's the point. And just all kinds of negative remarks when I say to them, I don't date. And what they don't understand is they're not looking for me. They don't care about me. What they're looking for is a hospice wife, because they have realized at their ripe old age that their kids aren't coming. Their kids aren't coming to take care of them. And now they really are all alone, and they're figuring out that they're all alone, and they don't like it. And so they're desperately seeking a woman. And it doesn't matter who she is. I mean, this literally just played out in my community, where a girl I know got married to a guy who seemed like a great guy on surface. And turns out he was lying and hiding a ton of stuff, because the only thing he wanted to do was to get married. And I know that because he approached me as well. And I could read it all over him. And here's the thing. Women in this age range, 45 to 60, that are single are realizing, I'm going to stay single. I spent the first part of my life raising a family, doing for everybody else. And I'm looking around and I'm on the downhill slope of life, myself included. And I'm realizing that I need to get out and live. There's things I want to do. These men are looking around and saying, oh my gosh, I'm on the downhill slope of life. Things are starting to go wrong with my body and myself, and I need a caretaker. And so they are desperately searching. Now, again, this does not apply to everybody. Don't come for me because I don't care. This is my opinion. And I would like to see the research on the correlation of women my age that are choosing to stay single and remain single, and men that are desperately seeking a spouse. Because I would say that that's a big number. But they're just looking for a hospice wife. And I'm not going to be anybody's hospice wife. Now, am I negating ever getting married again? Not entirely, but it would have to be somebody really, really super, super special. And they would have to knock me off my feet. And the likelihood of that is slim to none. But I get responses, you're going to die alone. Okay, fine. You're going to be all by yourself. That's the point. Y'all are running face first into the point and still not getting it. So, ladies, if you're single and in this age range, watch out. Don't become somebody's hospice wife.
Most people want to and do marry people in their same age range. And not only do they want that, and not only is that mostly what happens, it also is the best predictor for a marriage lasting and working out. According to this study, a 1-year discrepancy in a couple's age makes that couple 3% more likely to divorce when compared to their same age counterparts. A 5-year difference, however, makes them 18% more likely to split up, and a 10-year difference makes them 39% more likely, because you just are not very likely to have all that much in common with somebody when you have these huge age gaps. And even if, let's say you do momentarily, let's say that you're a 60-year-old and you meet a 40-year-old, or you're a 40-year-old and you meet a 20-year-old, and you all connect at that point in your lives. As you move through life, as things change, as you go through different phases, your ability to continue connecting with them and identifying with them and truly being a partner with them as they walk through those various phases, it just diminishes. It's not all that likely. Treating one person really well throughout a long period of time, that earns you respect, both from your family, from your kids, from that woman, and from your community around you. This message from the red pill is not just delusional revenge porn. It is toxic. It is going to keep you from fixing your life. It's going to keep you from attracting good women or experiencing any of the aforementioned things. It is so highly unlikely that this scenario will pan out for you, and even if it somehow does, that it will be enjoyable to you.
If you guys keep listening to the red pill community and this bullshit manosphere, you will never get women. They are making you bitter towards women, hateful, disrespectful towards women. How do you expect to get any women if you preach hate towards women? Understanding female nature is one thing, fellas. I agree. You have to understand the psychology of female nature. But if you don't have the game to back that up with experiences, with knowledge that you know when it comes to women, with your failures, your successes, that red pill, the female nature bullshit, it ain't gonna mean nothing, okay? You're not gonna be able to use that to your advantage. If you combine the game with female nature, that is powerful. That's how you get women, fellas. But you guys are doing it ass backwards. You want to learn about the red pill and the bullshit that they're preaching about female nature. It's a bunch of incels that hate women. That's all it is. They're teaching you guys to be fearful of women, to not get in relationships, to not date women, to not approach women. Oh, just focus on you, men going their own ways. This is how I know these guys get no women, because you don't understand the superpowers that certain high quality women have. You don't understand the value that they can add to your life. A good woman can influence a man without the need to be forceful. That is why high quality women are such a rare gem and commodity. But you have to learn how to attract those types of women. Not the women you see on the Fresh and Fit podcast or the whatever podcast or just pearly things. Those women are straight up basura. That's what they are. I don't mess with women like that. It gains mass views. That's why they have these women on these shows. But you don't learn shit about game or how to pick up women, how to approach women, how to date beautiful women, how to keep them in their feminine state, how to keep them loving you at all times. They don't teach you this shit, fellas. They teach you about the red pill because they know it gains mass followers. That's why. And you're being exploited by them disrespecting these women live on these podcasts, and you guys are falling for it. You guys are falling for it. They're all snakes in disguise. I want nothing to do with them. I don't even listen to that red pill bullshit anymore, fellas. I'm doing my own thing. I understand female nature. I understand the psychology of women. I have my own game that I learned with over 17 years of experience before any of this shit was even popular. But when you combine that game that you have with female nature and the psychology of women, you can never lose with women, fellas. That's why we're teaching you the real game. All those other podcasts with these bullshit hosts, they don't have game, fellas. They never got girls until they got a little bit of fame and status. That's not a ladies' man. That is a trick.
So yeah, what I would say to men in the red pill, but also just like to society at large, people who are, overly, I think, concerned about the birth rate or who really think that people should get married young and that's good for them, is go talk to the men and tell them these things. Tell them, fix your life now. Tell them, start treating women in your 20s really well. Start prioritizing getting married and having a family. Start working to ensure that you can bring skill sets and assets to the table that will make you a good partner and a good father. And for the men who feel like they aren't getting the attention that they should in their 20s, hold these other men accountable. These men that are wasting away women's 20s, locking them into like dead-end relationships so that they can have somebody split the bills, you should be the first to call these losers out. But at the end of the day, if you don't do these things, the only victim is going to actually be you. Women are going to be just fine in their 20s, and their 30s, and their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Women are more well-equipped to handle being single, and they aren't any less likely to be able to find somebody than men are. Desirable partners will always be desirable to people in their same age range, no matter what that is. All right, guys, that's a wrap for this week. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next week, stay based. If you like this show, don't forget to check out others in my series, Histrionics, here. And you can watch my other weekly show, the Base Politics Podcast, here.